Amazing. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you for having us. So it's a pleasure to be here today. My name's Kate,
And I'm Ian.
and as Zoe said, we're here for media education. So we were just gonna kick off straight away. And please, if you want to need us to repeat anything, if there's anything that you want to say, just stick it in the chat and we'll monitor the chat. And Zoe, if you see anything that we've missed, if you just interrupt us and say that we need to do something, we'll do it.
And I will be using chat as the instrument of engagement. So I hope you've got your typing fingers ready. Okay, so we're going to now go to some slides. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I think it's this one here. And I'm going to share this. Hopefully you're seeing our slide, which says welcome. If Zoe, are you seeing that?
Yes, but it's not full screen yet, so I think it's just taking a second.
Okay.
Maybe this one?
No.
Okay, bear with us for a minute.
No worries.
So we'll just start with the introduction while we wait for
it. Yeah, we can still see it just fine. That's okay.
That's fine.
So we're going to start with our kind of origin story, since it's a kind of storytelling workshop, just to tell you a little bit about the history of media education. So I'm going to hand over to Ian for that.
So if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin. In 1989, I was working with the local radio station here in Edinburgh, commercial station, 4th FM and Max AM. And I was doing social action broadcasting, which means that I was making programs about different aspects of things of interest to people. So this one year I was working on a program called about winter warmth, about the importance of keeping people warm, and it was I was doing a lot of broadcast inserts to which were a minute and a half that went into the normal programming of all the radio station. So this one was about winter warmth, and I arranged to go out to Wester Hailes to interview a woman out there, an elderly lady who had a damp house. I thought that would make a great story, because somebody would have to keep their house warm, would have to use more electricity or gas, and that would be a great story, a lot of drama in terms of putting across the message about winter warmth. When I got there, I saw this elderly lady. She was living in a house which was damp. It had black mold. And I asked her the question, tell me about your house. And she said, it's awfully damp, son. It's awfully damp. So I said, that's great. Thank you very much. I took that back. I spliced it into my broadcast and that went out. But I wasn't sure about whether it had any impact. If it was just infotainment, a bit like a chip wrapper, the next day, who'd know, who'd care. And it got me thinking about that person, about what would have changed for her, what could I have done differently? And I realized that if I had worked with her to form her own message, rather than me imposing with my question, because questions set agenda, if I'd just worked with her so she could form her own message, find out why our house was damp, who was responsible, what she could do about it, was it affecting others, what about her health, what were her rights, then that would be a much more powerful way of going about things. So that's why we set up media education in 1989. And so we're using filmmaking and expressive arts to support people to present their own stories. And so the image you're seeing there of the See Me, Let Me Speak absolutely encapsulates what we are about, which is to work with people for them to find their voice and make their arguments for what they want.
So then in 2016, we formed a CIC, a community interest company. And we did that because it was to be a non-hierarchical organisation where we have equal decision-making, equal pay across our whole team. But the primary purpose of that was because we form non-hierarchical teams with people with lived experience of the issues that they have in order to tell stories. And so we wanted our internal makeup of our organization to be the same as the way we wanted to work externally. So what we do, you see here, it says welcome and group agreement. In every session that we do, we work with people to form a group agreement as to how we can safely tell stories together. So we talk about boundaries of disclosure, what people want to share. We talk about informed consent, how throughout the process people should be revisiting if they're happy with their audience, if they are unhappy with what they're sharing, how do they protect themselves? So if they have lived experience of an issue, how do they think about how they can use that lived experience to tell their story rather than relating it in a way that can be re-traumatizing? So it's about thinking about the experience they have, but working with that to use creativity to tell a story. And so the group agreement we have looks at working with triggering content. How do we try and use creativity to mediate that? What do we need to put in place to keep people safe? And always revisiting that idea that the person is at the center of the story and needs to be happy with what they're doing. So we're just going to move on to our next slide. Oh, sorry, we've got to admit somebody into the room. So we'll just...
All right, I'll do all that. Don't worry, you guys keep... Yeah.
So one of the things that we're very aware of is that each and every person has their own context, has their own experience, has their own knowledge, and has their own story. And be very interested to find out what motivated you to attend today's session. I'm just thinking of a sentence or two, and if you'd like to put that into the chat, then we can understand more about each other and why we're here. And this is as the nearest we'll get to a kind of that introduction of everybody introducing themselves to everybody else. But it says, what was your motivation? Why did you choose to attend this? And if you'd just like to write something in there, that would be great.
Take a couple of minutes for that.
Yeah.
Creating stories can be impactful. Excited to meet everybody. That's lovely. Ethics of listening to other people's story and the responsibility of relating to someone's story. Brilliant. More person-centered storytelling. Brilliant. That's amazing. Learn new ways to tell story. Changing careers. Brilliant.
All of these are different aspects of and different contexts and different experiences that are being brought to bear in the telling of this story as we're working live now. And I think it's always interesting to bear in mind the knowledge and experience that people are already bringing to the story. And that includes your audience. And we'll be dealing with that a little bit more as we go through this. So I think we're on to our next slide, actually, which seems to have magically appeared. So thank you very, very much for those messages in the chats. So moving on now, we're thinking now about how are we going to tell stories ethically, and there's always the liminal point between the public and private life. I think that's something that has not really been fully understood by people when you think about Facebook and exposure on social media and so on. How are people navigating that? How do you understand what your public life is and what your private life is? And that has changed markedly with the advent of social media. So what we'd like you to do now is to be considering that and to look at this image that you see here. And I'd like you to begin to interpret it in your own terms. And I think that if we use the chat, you can put your ideas into the chat. But it's just, what are you seeing? And just that's what we'd like you to think about. What are you seeing? And then to note down just a few things in the chat. What are you seeing?
From this sign.
From the sign.
What do you think's going on in the sign? What could the person that made the sign be trying to say? Why have they maybe made it? Any thoughts you've got? Any associations it brings to bear?
Absolutely. So it's you cannot be wrong in what you see and think and feel about this sign. So what is it? What is it about it that you're noticing or thinking about?
Brilliant. Someone's concerned. They've made, yeah, absolutely. Cats in the street, brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking about who made that sign and what their motivation was to make that sign. I think motivation is a core part of storytelling, and it's something we need to be considering very carefully as well. So, and the elements about that, there's a real visceral cause of concern here, which is somebody worried about their cat, perhaps, or but it's got so much to it. It's a homemade sign. It is using official sign language. It's got humor to it. It's there's so much there in terms of it being somebody entering into a public life. And the other thing that I'd like you to think about from looking at this sign is that it's about awareness. So the communication here has caused awareness, has caused a focus out of everything in the world down to a cat. So that's the power of the message. And this person is using that power to make their point. So we can't have action before we have awareness. And that's one of the key points about storytelling is that it builds awareness. And as we'll see later on, it'll build awareness on the teller's terms.
So also what's happening here is somebody's made a decision to take a private concern and make it public. They've moved to an action, they've used creativity to do it, but they've taken something that is of a personal experience to them and they've presented it out into the world. But in doing so and in using creativity, they've remained completely anonymous. So they haven't exposed themselves in any way. They haven't had to take a public platform. They've used a different method in order to do that. And that's something that we often discuss with the people in our storytelling. If people want to to be in front of the camera and to explain their story, that's fine. And we'll have a lot of discussions around the safest way to do that. We'll work through the messages that the person wants to communicate and how to do that. But also you can make a decision not to take a public stance, but to do that anonymously. And the ways you can do that is obviously to use images, metaphorical images, or graphics, or something else in storytelling to get your point across. We'll just move on to the next slide. You want to say the beginning of this?
Yes, so we're going to show you a film now. And this is a film that's been made by Lena, and it's called Voodoo, and it's about the ritual washing before prayer that Muslims do. And as you're watching this film, I'd like you to just think about what's its impact on you? How is this person communicating? What are the factors that are aiding their communication? And what we'll do is we'll then have a short analysis of that afterwards, and then perhaps watch the film again so that we're seeing it twice. So I think we can press go, yeah. And then we want to go. And I hope you're getting sound through on this.
Muslims pray 5 times a day. The first prayer is performed between dawn and sunrise. The second and third prayers are in the afternoon. The fourth prayer is just after sunset, and the fifth is at night. And for our prayers to be correct and accepted, we must perform wudu first. The point of wudu is to wash the 5 senses, to purify them before praying. To do my wudu, I would wash my hands, wash my mouth 3 times by gargling. Wash my nose, then wash my face. Wash my arms all the way to the elbow, and then gently wipe some water on top of my head and my ears, and then wash my feet all the way up to the ankles. To do my wudu, I need to have access to water and privacy. There have been times when I performed my wudu in the women's public toilet and people stared and I didn't feel comfortable. It's always difficult to also find a space to pray. In the past, there were times when I prayed inside fitting rooms or behind parked cars. So in general, I can pray anywhere as long as it's clean and reasonably quiet. Finding a place to perform my wudu and to pray is a constant source of stress. Other than in airports, it's generally not easy to find a place to pray unless I go to the mosque, and there isn't always one nearby. In Edinburgh, I would like to see more spaces with facilities to perform wudu and more quiet places to pray.
Fantastic. So we're just going to stop that and come out of our full screen. So we'll just have a wee chat about Lena's film. So obviously when we were working with Lena, we worked to prioritise what Lena's message would be, and we talked about how Lena wanted to deliver that message, and then how we could best tell that story. And the decision was also to connect it into a legislation that was relevant to that story, and also to broaden the context from something that Lena needed and would like to see to something that was of benefit and value to everybody. So the collective need for quiet spaces was also something that Lena very much wanted to bring to light. And then in discussion with Lena, we have identified audiences for the film, and we've been sharing it, and Lena's been presenting it to try and bring about a kind of more awareness generally of anybody that can offer facilities for wudu, but also just make quiet spaces available. And it's been really successful. We know that in Edinburgh in particular, that services have responded and are putting into place areas for washing and for prayer. So we'll keep doing that. But this is an example of a film where obviously Lena decided that she wanted to deliver the message, that she didn't need anonymity, that it was something that she wanted to explain and own and campaign and advocate for. But the process in which we got to that was through constantly visiting whether Lena was happy with how the film looked, whether she was still sure that she wanted to be the main focus of the film, what to share, what not to share, how to word everything, how to do it in a way that wasn't in any way exposing to Lena, that remained within the boundaries of what Lena was comfortable with, and through a constant interrogation of how that story could have the longest life possible and be something that was empowering and something to be proud of and something that Lena could own and use to advocate for what she wanted. So we would hope that we had delivered on all the ethics of creating a story together, and like we continue to revisit that with Lena in different scenarios. I don't know if there's anything you want to
no, I
add.
do. And I think that the other thing here is that thinking about the choices of whether you put yourself as the storyteller in the frame, like Lena has done, there's something about empowering. There's the dignity of it. There's the sense of her presence and taking power and using the power that she has as that individual to put across that message, that calmness, all of those kinds of things, the dignity, the calm, the intimacy as well, in terms of thinking about that she is allowing us into her world in that way. And all of those considerations round about that. The other thing I wanted to point out here was the structure of the story. So we're looking at the story arc. It starts off with, who am I? What do I want to talk about? Why is it important? What's the impact on me? And then it's moving from the personal to the general, in terms of it's saying, what is the principle involved here? It's connecting this into values.
Yeah.
So that's a really vital point here, is that and that's part of the creation of the argument, the making change, the making an argument for something. So she's demonstrating the power of her faith, the power of herself, and using that, which is, I think, in terms of, for me, that's what this story is about, and why it's effective, and thinking about what makes an effective argument, an effective story. I'm using the word story and argument almost in the same way, because all of our work is about looking for moments of change, and Lena has been very effective with this.
And linking the individual into the collective space, and the individual need for change into the collective space for change, that we can all be part of. I don't know whether we have time to watch it again. I think we go straight on. So we go on to the next. You can move through it, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that now.
So we'll yeah, there's one more.
Oh, there we are. All right. So this is another short bit of audience participation here. Okay. So in terms of that was Lena telling a story. And this is our opportunity to connect some random words together to form a story. And I would like you to just think of your own story, and then we'll think about what's happening afterwards. Okay, so here we go. So the first offer, and there are 5 words, is cloudy sky. And if you're thinking about cloudy sky and associations that it might make for you, I'm inviting you to form your own story or a set of associations from these words.
You're not going to have to share it with anybody.
And you don't have to share it with anybody. I will. I'm going to play as well here, so I might share mine at the end. All right. So cloudy sky. So you've got that. You're thinking about that. It's maybe a mood, or it's maybe a place, or something like that. More specific, a house. So if you're visualizing that or thinking about that or making an association between cloudy sky and house, what's happening for you? Oh, we've added a dog into this. So what's the relationship with the dog? How does that fit in? How are you adjusting your story? We have the word money now. Maybe that's influencing the way that you're seeing the house or the dog or the cloudy sky. And finally, biscuit. So putting those together, we can connect those and create a story around about that. You know, so perhaps it's a wide open space. There's a house silhouetted. There's a dog outside. All right, we're changing it now. It's a beautiful house in the Rocky Mountains. There's loads of money about, and there's somebody throwing a biscuit to the dog. We're all natural storytellers, and our desire is to make meaning by making connection between different, disparate things. That's how we make story, and that's how we make connection. So any story that's told is, you think you're telling the story, but what's actually happening is that people are making the story based on what you are presenting. They make the story. And I think that it's understanding that and understanding the importance of the power of the audience and what they bring, the knowledge and experience they bring to tell the story, is really what's important about this, that we're thinking about it the other way around. I don't have responsibility for the story in that people own it in their own way. They tell the story, they make their associations.
And I think what we wanted to get across from that was that no story is told out with a context. So we all have a context for being here today. We all shared our motivations earlier. And the fact that no story can ever take place out with a context also means that stories are political and that they are based in a political context. And one of the things that we would like to talk about now is about the power of the platform. Who has a platform? How, if you are able to tell your story, then you have power because you've been given space to do so. And with that comes responsibility. It's like the Spider-Man thing, but it's true that if you have the power of a platform, then you need to think about who doesn't have a platform. What are the other stories that we don't hear? And how should they be informing how I'm acting and how I'm telling my story? Where are the invisible narratives? And there's a lot, this is really current for us, obviously, with X and Elon Musk at the moment, and people getting really jumpy about controlling of stories and narratives. And it's real and it's true. And so we're just going to go through a bit of an exercise about to help us all think about dominant narratives, invisible narratives, the power of the platform, and how we can incorporate that into our understanding of ethical storytelling. So Ian was just going to quickly read us a story.
Yes, if you're all sitting comfortably, and then I'll begin. And this is a very truncated version. And if you don't know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, then this will help. And if you do know the story, then you can just compare your version to mine. Okay. So once upon a time, there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone. She was called Little Red Riding Hood because she wore a little red riding hood. Okay. One day her mother said to her, "Little Red Riding Hood, could you please take this basket of food to your granny in the woods because she's not feeling very well?" And Little Red Riding Hood said, "Of course, Mummy, I'll do that." Now, grandmother lived in the wood, and just as Little Red Riding Hood entered the wood, a wolf met her. Little Red Riding Hood didn't know what a wicked creature the wolf was and was so not afraid of him. And the wolf said, "Where are you off to?" And Little Red Riding Hood said, "I'm off to visit Granny with all this food." And the wolf said, "Well, that all looks very vegetarian to me." I've now deviated from the story. I'm on to my own story, and said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll go and let her know that you're coming, but why don't you pick some flowers for her? That'll be very, very nice." So Little Red Riding Hood thought that's a great idea. And so she stopped to pick flowers. Meanwhile, the wolf went to grandmother's house and went inside and immediately devoured the grandmother and hopped into bed disguised as the granny. And we all know this next bit of the story, which is, well, many of us know the next bit, which is when Little Red Riding Hood arrives, she sees in the dimness the outline of who she thinks is her granny, but she's not sure. And she says, "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have." And the wolf says, "All the better to hear you." "What big eyes you have, all the better to see you." "What big mouth you have, all the better to eat you." And I know Rose is just arriving at this point, but all the better to eat you. And of course, devours Little Red Riding Hood. At that moment, the woodcutter comes past, sees that this has happened through the open doorway, chops the head off the wolf, and manages to unzip the wolf and release Little Red Riding Hood and her granny, and they all lived happily ever after the end. Right. I hope you enjoyed that. I was going quite fast at the end because I realized I only gave myself a minute to tell that story. But anyway, you've got the general idea of the story. We were talking really about what are the stories that we're not hearing. That was the Grimm's fairy tale, loosely told with a bit of vegetarianism in. But it's interesting, whose voice do we not hear? What perspective are we not understanding from this? What assumptions have been made with the story? And the question, what would the wolf want to say about this? And you can imagine what that might be. It could be that it's, you know, the humans have removed all my normal prey that I normally eat, so I'm forced to go somewhere else for what I need to eat.
The forest used to be our domain. No one used to come into the forest.
Yes, you know, look at me here. I've been dressed up as a granny. How should it's so anti-wolf this? You know, I don't know, but you're seeing the point here is that it's about what are the hidden stories, what are the perspectives that we are not seeing. So the absence of story, there's the dominant hegemony, there's the, you know, whatever those narratives are, what's missing from all of that? What is the motivation of the storyteller? Why are they telling that story?
And understanding that every story has an agenda, you know, and that what happens and what has happened and happens in all cultures is that the more power and platform you have, then the chances are that the information that you are communicating becomes part of a dominant narrative. And based on that, there's a canon of knowledge. So our knowledge comes from those dominant narratives, and we often make assumptions based on that. And so one of the things that we work towards is to try and say, well, how do we try and create space for other narratives to come in, for other perspectives, and to try and feed new and different stories from people that possibly might not have a platform or a voice into the broader cultural sphere, so that we can be better educated, have less assumptions, have more understanding, walk in other people's shoes, build new consensus together around who as a society we want to be, and also to try and subvert in the smallest way that we can some of the more dominant narratives, to try and give them to try and present different perspectives.
Yes. So one of the things here that I think is really important is that it's back to the thinking around awareness. If you are aware of something, you cannot then become unaware of it. And therefore, that story does have an influence, even if it's not the dominant narrative. And we cannot have change without awareness. Awareness is one of the first steps for change. And so, and the more, our feeling is that the more facets of the diamond of truth, as it were, that we are seeing and hearing, the more perceptive we can be, the more nuanced we can be, the more that we can find practical and real solutions to improve fairness, equity, opportunity, and to build a society with a bit more social and environmental justice. So it's that kind of thing and I suppose at the bottom of all of that is the idea of trust, that you know, that sense that most people want the better thing. So, and if how we're operating, and you know, that kind of world where we think, you know, there's some kind of cabal.
And I suppose the final thing that we wanted to sort of say was we don't always get a great reception for the stories that we make, and sometimes the stories that we make, people don't want to hear them because they maybe don't suit a political purpose, or they are coming at a point when there's an agenda, the political agenda is going one way, and some of the voices of the people that we work with want to say things counter to that, and we have to negotiate that and find as many different ways as we can to present that voice in as responsible way as we can. But we also sometimes find ourselves having to recognize that maybe it's about trying to find common ground. So it's about accepting that not everyone's going to agree with your story. Not everyone's going to have that same perspective. Not everyone's going to even want to hear it. But at least we can enter into a discussion about why that might be the case. What are the tricky, thorny issues that people don't want to hear or don't want to acknowledge? And even just having those conversations, presenting that story, having those conversations, we believe there's a real value in that, because you're beginning to explore areas where, you know, people are a little bit uncomfortable, and that in itself is really valuable, that trying to challenge our comfort zone and we would like our own comfort zone. When we say we're including us in that, you know, because one of the pleasures and privileges about working for media education is we work with people of all ages across Scotland, and there's never a day if I ever think I really know something, you can bet your bottom dollar something's going to happen that is going to like make you realize that you don't, and you have to go back to learning again and again and again, because you're always meeting new people that are adding a different twist and turn to what you think is stable ground, and incorporating that. And that's the beauty of stories, is that they keep that conversation going, and they keep us awake and alive and learning and thinking and negotiating what's tricky in our society.
And they open up the possibility for change.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that's a pretty good place to leave it. One of the things we would like is, we started off at the beginning of this with your motivations for attending this session. And now we really welcome thoughts, ideas, moments that you would like to share in a few lines using the chat for the benefit of everybody else and us.
And I'm just reading some of the things in the chat. We're not asking for an evaluation at all. It's just anything else that you want to say to the group. We don't hear grandma's perspectives. Absolutely, we don't hear grandma's perspective. We don't hear the mum's perspective on why she needs help from Little Red Riding Hood. We don't hear the hunter's perspective on, you know, how he has to massacre this animal. There's so many things that you could just take that one story and unpick it and unpick it and unpick it. So if there's any questions, anything anyone wants to ask, it seems though
there was one question further up from someone who asked if it's okay to share the link to the video of Voodoo.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll send that out with the recording. Yeah.
And no, please do. And Voodoo was made as part of our Thrive project, and for our Thrive project, which won the collaboration award with Creative Edinburgh, that is a group of we have 23 people. They're from 13 different countries, and they meet as an advisory group, and we will be screening those films throughout the next year at lots of different events, and the people who made them will be hosting those screenings and having conversations about some of the issues that we've uncovered learning together. Any books or resources?
We'll have a think about that. I know that I'm very fond of Margaret Ledwith as an author on community development and on complexity and the interconnectedness of motivations and purposes, so that people you need to find moments of common ground in the complexity of trying to create positive change. So I'd recommend anything by Margaret Ledwith.
George Hine Constructivist Museum, which looks to connect the visitor with their own knowledge. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? Is that like everyone coming here today, we all have our own knowledge and our own things that we could share together. And it's always tricky to try and find a way in which that can happen, so we can sort of maximize the knowledge in the room and learn from one another. So if anyone else can answer any of the questions, if anyone else has read any good books or good resources, please put them in the chat. And what we can do as well is we can have a proper think, and then we can send to Zoe some of the things that because I know I'm thinking about the pedagogy of the oppressed that you were reading and things like that. So we will we'll get you
that's
some.
Paula Frary.
Yeah, and share them. William Randall, The Narrative Complexity of Ordinary Life, Tales from the Explorations of Narrative Psychology.
Thank you. I'm going to go and order that. But yeah, no, so I think that is us done. But thank you so much for your attention. It's been a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege for you to have donated the time for us to speak to you. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Yes, Andrew, we'll have the list sent out. So I'll send out this recording and everything to you all. So I'm just going to stop recording now.